The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
You know, I hear that they're standing in line for hours.
Tonight on Politics Now, new rules and long lines. Businesses that can start allowing more people in while health officials trying to get the vaccine out quickly. Plus,
these dollars, thankfully, are a little bit flexible with how we can utilize them.
money for schools, renters, and small businesses. The state's economic stimulus being pushed through the legislative session.
Do I identify as queer? I identify as bisexual, pansexual.
And we meet one of the newest members of the Hispanic Legislative Caucus, Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm John Langler. Signs of progress in the fight against the coronavirus. Hope for some relief to businesses that are struggling to get through these health guidelines. Starting on Monday, some of Nevada's restrictions will be eased. Governor Steve Sisolak laid out a 75-day plan to fully reopen the economy. Starting on Monday, indoor dining, places of worship, gyms, and gaming floors at casinos, bowling alleys as well. They will move to a limit of 100 people or 35% capacity. On Thursday, the governor also gave a vaccine update, and he says more than 390,000 doses have been administered. However, there is concern it's not happening fast enough.
You may have seen how we're experiencing long lines at vaccination sites. The Clark County Convention Center is an example today with seniors 70 and up standing for hours. With all due respect to the hard work going into this, and while I know you don't run the Southern Nevada Health District, is it time for the state to team up to try to help fix technical issues, to perhaps do drive-through vaccination sites? They're doing those drive-throughs in California.
Well, we have, my team has been in Southern Nevada. They're working with Southern Nevada to help alleviate these situations. We're taking federal advice as it becomes available on this. We certainly don't want our seniors, our most vulnerable, standing in line for hours. You know, I hear that they're standing in line for hours, and then the health district is telling me that, 15% of the people aren't showing up for appointments, and there's duplicate appointments. This is a Herculean task to undertake.
The governor also expressed support for getting children back in schools, and he pointed out 16 of Nevada's 17 counties have already taken that step. However, as we know, most of the Clark County School District is still doing distance learning, at least until early March. Now to look at the state legislative session. A hot topic in the session so far, fixing Nevada's unemployment system. Lawmakers started talking about this issue in Senate Bill 75, a bill that was requested by Dieter. Testimony from the department included the technical changes among staff, how much money employers are paying into the system, and borrowing money from the federal government. However, the focus of the event quickly turned to why it's taking so long for Nevadans to get their money. Dieter blames it on a tsunami of fraud. And in order to confirm fraud, Dieter says it needs to identify each claim, and that's just taking up resources.
This hit on fraud has really slowed down the entire process of being able to get these people paid. We want to get them paid, trust me. But we also don't want to send bad money out the door.
Dieter says it's recovered $100 million in fraudulent payments already and prevented $2 billion from being sent to fake accounts. No vote was taken on that Senate bill. Some criminal justice and police reform bills are also starting to be written up in Carson City. Lawmakers promised to take measures to deal with bias training after a summer of Black Lives Matter protests. Senate Bill 108 would require any person employed in the criminal justice system to take implicit bias and cultural competency training. It's sponsored by the Senate Judiciary Committee. A bill requiring police officers to complete those trainings already took effect back in 2019. This bill would apply to other people in law enforcement, mainly the courts and attorneys. It does not have a hearing scheduled just yet. Democrats are making another run at passing a dignity in death bill. It's the fourth straight session a physician-assisted suicide bill has been introduced. The 2019 version passed the Senate but not the Assembly. This version is sponsored by State Senator Dallas Harris. In this case, a secondary physician and 2 witnesses would have to sign off on administering the lethal drugs. Oregon was the first state to pass a dignity in death measure about 20 years ago. So far there, about 1,000 people have taken advantage. More than 90% of them were in hospice care at the time. Another big topic is economic assistance. More than $500 million in federal money is being set aside for renters and schools here in southern Nevada. The spending was approved by the Interim Finance Committee this week. In all, $208 million is going to rental assistance programs. Nevada's Division of Housing estimates it'll help about 20,000 households. $162 million will be spent here in Clark County. Money will go directly from the state's account right to the landlord. The Clark County School District is getting a larger chunk of money as well, about $350 million. But it's important to note this will be on top of money that's already in the distributive school account. The money is slated to help reopen schools safely and outfit them with new technology. State Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro told 8 News Now some ways the money could be spent is to fund summer learning, teacher training, and sanitation.
One of the things that some of these funds can be utilized for example, are things like addressing learning loss with students. So how do we start to do that? With providing assistance for summer learning programs. With training for our educators on how to keep the classroom safe and sanitized to protect against the virus once we start to open up schools. There's money in there to address kids who might be either in an English language learner program or in a lower income community and so have had a more difficult time accessing our educational facilities during the pandemic when they haven't been able to attend in school. And so there's some guidance in there that allows for us to help with those programs to address some of the needs of those students. These dollars, thankfully, are a little bit flexible with how we can utilize them.
So to put this in perspective, the entire general fund for the state budget a year is about $4 billion. The $630 million federal stimulus approved a month and a half ago, it's a hefty chunk of change. We're going to have a link to apply for the rental assistance and the other information about this at 8newsnow.com. The first bill to pass and be signed by Governor Sisolak was money for small businesses. Assembly Bill 106 was fast-tracked through this week. It puts $50 million more into a pandemic grant program called PETS. Oracle Manna explains who could get that funding.
We took a hit by having to reduce staff in some areas.
Like many Nevada small businesses, Sonia Pedowick's consulting company has been crippled by COVID-19. She applied for the Pandemic Emergency Technical Support or PETS grant last fall to get help.
I met all of the qualifications as outlined in the portal.
But with so many asking for aid, the money just wasn't there. Now there's hope.
I'd love to put it back into workforce, right, and be able to hire back staff and talent. Offset some of my overhead costs would be, a blessing.
For many of our small businesses, the funding they were provided was the difference between staying open or closing their doors.
The same goes for nonprofits such as United Citizens Foundation, which provides mental health services to kids and families. Staff say the money made a difference.
So the PETS grant allowed us to fill in that gap to be able to see some kids that did not have a pay source, that did not have insurance.
Those in limbo right now can only do one thing.
I'm waiting and being as patient as I can.
Oracle Manna, 8 News Now.
Because the state gives this out, it's accessible to small businesses with less than 50 employees. Many of those companies couldn't get the PPP loans before to stay afloat. The corporations, though, cannot apply for it. The state says all funds have to be distributed by June 30th. There are a couple of bills up at the legislative session that deal with pets and animal issues. Senate Bill 103, for example, would stop your home insurance company from raising or canceling your insurance based on the breed of your dog. Many companies charge higher insurance if you have a dog like a pit bull or a Rottweiler. Assembly Bill 101 allows veterans to give CBD or cannabis products to their animals for medical treatments. Neither of those bills have had their first hearing scheduled just yet. Next on Politics Now, criminal justice reform in the legislature.
How do we provide services to folks to really address why they're offending in the first place?
Welcome back to Politics Now.
There are several new first-time lawmakers up at the state legislature in Carson City, including some of the youngest members of the legislature ever. 3 freshman Democrats are joining the Hispanic Legislative Caucus, and Christian Cazares has been talking to them. Christian, hello.
That's right, John. Well, this week I talked to Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez. She represents District 16, which is in the central portion of Clark County. She is half Thai and half Mexican. I asked her about representing her heritage and criminal justice reform. You're kind of like a part of this new wave of Latinos and also a younger generation that's going into the leadership role. What's that like? And also, how do you think that'll kind of play a part in working down the road and kind of, working also to get support from both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. It is such a privilege and an honor to join my Latina and Latino brothers and sisters up here. I think that, it matters, on the campaign trail. I can't tell you how many text messages I have, screenshotted and saved where folks are like, you're Mexican, I'm Mexican, you have 3 Mexican votes in this household. Representation really matters. And it matters in a way where folks can look at their elected officials and their leaders and think to themselves, that's a Latina or that's an Asian American woman. I can see myself in that person. I can see myself in their story and that I can also become an elected official as well, and that I deserve to be a leader to represent our community.
I was reading a little bit about you, and I saw that obviously you have a big passion for the criminal justice system reform. What comes next in your mind, and how much change do you think that you can accomplish during your term?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that criminal justice reform, as you've seen in the last couple of years, has really gained a lot of bipartisanship. Our communities are hurting, our families are hurting, our prison system, is hurting in terms of not being funded to what they need to be, right? And so, unfortunately, here in Nevada, we incarcerate higher than the national average. And so I'm really looking forward to working on bringing change on how we view offenders.
We could see some sort of bill being introduced by you hopefully soon?
Yes, I did submit a BDR to address the prison population in a national health pandemic. I'm very excited to work on that with a lot of different community partners and stakeholders. I'm currently in that process. Is it safe to say that,
that you are like an LGBT ally? And if so, being Nevada, being so liberal and so far, they've made so many steps moving forward in that area. Is that something that maybe you see yourself kind of spearheading some sort of, action or something down the road?
Yeah, so great question. I love the question. I actually do identify as queer. I identify as bisexual, pansexual. And so not only am I an ally, but I'm a member of the community, and I'm the first Asian American LGBTQ queer elected official in this state. So that's a lot, right? And so I definitely am looking forward to, with sessions to come and time to come, continue that work of advocacy for the community.
Very interesting, Christian. Did Assemblywoman Gonzalez give any other insight on some other measures that she's working on up in Carson City?
Actually, yes, she said that she's also working on a bill to make lower income people a protected class and other related climate change bills. That's all I have for you right now. John, back to you in the studio.
Great, thank you, Christian. Appreciate that.
You're watching Politics Now.
You've probably heard about house arrest before, or bail or bond. Alternatives to being in jail while someone is awaiting trial. But accused murderers, turns out they're not always in custody. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy takes a closer look at this issue.
At least 35 defendants charged with murder in Clark County are not in jail. The circumstances vary. A woman who police say shoved an elderly man off a bus, a security guard accused of killing a man on the job, and several alleged acts of domestic violence. At least 9 are accused of killing children, most of them their own.
He paid less for his bond than the cost of my child's funeral.
Veronica Melton's son Giovanni was 14 years old. Her ex-husband, Wendell Melton, is accused of shooting him back in 2017 because he was gay. Today, he's on house arrest awaiting trial.
Utterly perplexing. I don't understand the system.
Metro Deputy Chief Laz Chavez says on average, 30 to 40 people charged with murder are not behind bars. That's about 10% of open murder cases right now.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating for the police department.
Metro Police keep track of electronic monitoring and house arrest.
Some of the worst crimes, which is taking the life of another human being, is that the one where you get to go home or not? I would argue that it's not.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
Ozzie Fumo is a criminal defense attorney.
Just because the accusation is made that someone has committed a crime doesn't mean they're guilty of that crime. There's a process for it.
The burden falls on prosecutors to convince a judge to keep the person in jail.
In 99% of these cases, the district attorney's office seeks a significant bail.
District Attorney Steve Wolfson says that may be as much as $1 million in some cases.
It's always up to the judge. The judges make the ultimate decision.
The judge considers whether the defendant will be a danger to the community. According to Metro, from 2018 to 2020, 8 defendants charged with murder who were on house arrest were accused of committing new crimes, including assault, sex offense, and more. The judge also considers whether a defendant will willingly return to court. The department reports no defendants charged with murder fled over the past 2 years. But in 2019, Christopher Prestopino was a no-show. He's accused of killing a woman and dumping her body in the desert. He posted a $500,000 bond. Police found him at his house while he was supposed to be in court and took him back to jail.
It took the wind out of the sails of all of us, thinking that this is the one who meets the criteria for house arrest.
The I-Team examined court records to find out whether certain judges were more likely to grant bail, house arrest, or electronic monitoring for defendants charged with murder. And we found no major trends.
I think now we're finally equaling the scales of justice because we have judges who understand the law.
We will continue to investigate these crimes. What happens afterwards needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be looked at and maybe reconsidered.
Wolfson says a defendant out of custody can sometimes delay a case. If a defendant isn't in jail, he says their legal team may not hesitate in asking for continuances. Veronica Melton says she's been waiting more than 3 years for justice.
But the action and the result is still the same. I still have a dead child.
Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
In one case, our I-Team found bail was reduced for the defendant because of the coronavirus. According to court records, though, he has asthma. Metro Police say as of Thursday, 15 inmates have COVID-19 and were in isolation. Deputy Chief Chavez, who you heard from there, insists there is room for defendants charged with murder to be safely housed. Metro reports 36% vacancy. The second impeachment trial, meanwhile, of Donald Trump is underway in Washington, D.C. House managers have argued the Capitol attack cost taxpayers millions of dollars, but more importantly, has compromised American national security. Washington, D.C. correspondent Alexandra Limon reports.
Good evening, and once again today, the House impeachment managers played videos, including some of their fellow lawmakers, remembering how they used pieces of furniture inside the U.S. Capitol to make makeshift weapons in case they needed to fight their way out of the mob. One of the impeachment managers, Congresswoman Diana DeGette, argued the mob came because former President Donald Trump invited them.
Their own statements before, during, and after the attack make clear the attack was done for Donald Trump, at his instructions, and to fulfill his wishes.
Lead impeachment manager Congressman Jamie Raskin said Trump knew his supporters could become violent because it happened before when extremists plotted to kidnap Michigan's governor.
When responding to extremist plots in Michigan, Trump showed he knew how to use the power of a mob to advance his political objectives.
But despite the case House managers are trying to make, most Republican senators say the managers haven't proved Trump caused the attack.
Particularly remembering the defense has not yet brought its case, where I'm sure they're going to show footage of the president's actual speech where he said, go and peacefully protest.
Raskin told senators there's no reason to believe Trump won't continue to promote violence if he ever returns to office.
Would you bet the lives of more police officers on that? Would you bet the safety of your family on that? Would you bet the future of your democracy on that?
A conviction by the U.S. Senate would block Trump from running for office again in the future. Starting tomorrow, we'll hear the defense from Trump's lawyers. Reporting in Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Of course, that was earlier in the week. The U.S. Attorney for Nevada is one of dozens that'll be leaving his post. Nicholas Trutanich announced his last day will be February 28th. Trutanich was sworn in January 2019 after unanimous confirmation by the U.S. Senate. Before that, he served as chief of staff to Nevada's Attorney General at the time, Adam Laxalt.